Cheng Ling, the descendant of modern martial arts, traveled to ancient times of war and brought his family to flee, farm, practice medicine, and engage in business. Working hard for tomorrow is only for the sake of finding a place to settle down in this unfamiliar era, where one can stand up with dignity instead of kneeling down to seek survival. But who knew that dressing up as a man was too successful for women, to the extent that the new dynasty left her a good name everywhere. Young Master of the Marquis's Mansion. Young Master Cheng is talented and eloquent, and all he talks about is governing the world. I must recommend him to the Crown Prince. Guozijian Sacrifice Wine. Cheng Xiaoyu has a beautiful heart, and the day when the imperial examination is reopened will surely be the time for him to become famous. If he can't even win the top spot, I will definitely hit the pillar to report to the heavens. Miss of the Prime Minister's Mansion. Dr. Cheng is a genius in heaven, but he has a noble character and does not admire fame and fortune. I respect and love him. Even if we were destined to have no connection, we should still ask the Crown Prince's cousin to give him a background. 10-mile spring breeze, flower queen. Except for the 3 feet of snow on your body, who in the world should wear white clothes? Are they okay with you in the court? With a light sigh, there can only be distant delivery. The Crown Prince, who is always mentioned intentionally or unintentionally, has already quietly raised his chin. Crown Prince. My brother, my confidant, what do you say? Cheng Ling. Keywords of the novel. The transmission of Chinese martial arts in ancient times, confidants throughout the world without pop-ups. The transmission of Chinese martial arts in ancient times, confidants throughout the world. Download the complete set of TXT, the transmission of Chinese martial arts in ancient times, confidants throughout the world. Latest chapters for reading. Chapter 1. Escape from Wilderness at the Beginning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Escape from Wilderness at the Beginning. In the autumn of the 11th year of Jianda, the world of Eastern Qi was in chaos. When Cheng Ling woke up, she heard a burst of crying and shouting. No. You go. Auntie, don't sell me, big sister. We won't exchange food anymore. The other girl's voice remained firm and said, change. Give me 5 dummy, and I'll follow you. Cheng Ling opened her eyes and felt pain all over her body, not knowing what kind of injury she had suffered, but she didn't care about it. First, look around, there are many people surrounded in a chaotic manner. A short and sturdy woman was standing with her waist crossed, spitting profusely and cursing, 5 dough of rice. Consider yourself the golden sparrow who wants to go to heaven. Just like you, a girl who doesn't want anything, dare to take 5 dough of rice. She doesn't even pee to take care of herself. Giving us a dough is considered a kind and compassionate act of our golden lord. Cursing from this side, Cheng Ling's gaze crossed over these few people and landed on a bearded man standing a few meters away. This little mustache is holding his arms with both hands, his eyes are thin, and there is a sparkling light between them. I don't know why, but at first glance, Cheng Ling Dun knew that this person was Mr. Jean. The girl standing on the side in front, crying with tears in her eyes, is the second sister Cheng Ernie, and the older sister Cheng Danny is the one who said she wants to sell herself with 5 buckets of rice. The woman who cursed was actually their neighbor's Aunt Lu. As for some onlookers around, there are both unfamiliar and familiar faces. Cheng Ling took a glance and didn't have time to distinguish one by one, only feeling that it was dilapidated. Yes, not a single one of these people is dressed neatly, they are all in tatters and filth, and they are all gray and unremarkable. Except for that Mr. Jean and a few people standing next to him who looked like thugs. Also, these people are all wearing ancient costumes. Cheng Ling, who had turned around, covered her head and had a realization that she had traveled through time. Lu, who had cursed all over, was laughing and saying to Jean Yi, that's this girl. With just a bucket of rice, it's enough. With just a bucket, you can take it with you. Speaking, he reached out to pull Cheng Danny. Cheng Danny shook her hand and dodged, only taking a few steps when Jinyi, who had been holding her arms silently, suddenly waved his hand. The thugs around him rushed up, and some even laughed heartily. "Little girl, don't hide. Come back with us, Jinyi. After entering the city, at least you'll have enough to eat. What are you doing outside? Waiting to starve to death?" He also said, 5 dough. That's yesterday's price, today's 1 dough. You came to the city gate from your own family to spread the word that you want to sell people, not us forcibly robbing common women. Our Jinyi is a kind person, don't do that. The thugs are talking wildly, but the price is just a bucket. Where would Cheng Danny be willing to comply? I just struggled and said, I won't sell a bucket of rice. Cheng Ernie wanted to protect her sister. During the tug and tug, one thug pushed her away, while the other lifted a stick and threw it at her head. As blood was about to splatter on the spot, suddenly a person rushed towards me with a slanted thrust. Someone pulled Cheng Ernie apart and extended 2 fingers, almost like a venomous dragon, piercing straight into the attacker's eyes. Is it still good if it's poked? The thug's heart was pounding with fear, and he instinctively turned around and closed his eyes. But he was clearly vigorously swinging his stick, and when he turned around, he used the wrong force, causing the stick to be thrown back wildly. Bang! Suddenly hit a thug next to him, causing a scream of "Ayo!" The nosebleed flew wildly, and the person fell to the ground on the spot. The thugs in the tug-of-war all turned their eyes as if they had been pressed the pause button. Cheng Ernie was extremely surprised. She looked at Cheng Ling, who had just pulled herself apart, and tears of joy came out of her eyes. Linga, you're awake. Cheng Ling actually feels a bit dizzy and has pain all over her body, but she knows that in the current situation, she must stand up. What kind of world is it to buy a big girl with just a bucket of rice? Cheng Lingyang raised his other hand, the broken porcelain sharpness on it shining brightly. She walked up to Cheng Danny, pulled her behind her, and put on a protective posture. Perhaps her eyes were too sharp and terrifying, or perhaps her recent skills were intimidating, or perhaps the broken porcelain pieces in her hands had some degree of intimidation. Of course, it is also possible that the thugs are already a mob and are afraid to be taken aback. In short, her pull was not obstructed by anyone. Just a few thugs looked at Cheng Ling with a gloomy gaze, while the genie walked over with his hands in his hands and squinted his eyes. Little brother, are you breaking the rules? Cheng Ling is dressed in men's clothing. Although she has not yet grown up, just standing there, she naturally has a strong and upright momentum like a small pine tree, which invisibly makes people look up at her. This is not an exaggeration. You should know that the refugees scattered outside this city are basically refugees with today and no tomorrow. After experiencing the experience of fleeing the wilderness, the essence and spirit of these people have basically dissipated. Even if there is something that has not yet become numb, the fear and awkwardness from the lower class of the common people naturally exist and cannot be concealed. After all, temperament is something that truly requires environment and knowledge to cultivate. Otherwise, how could there be a saying called living, moving, qi, nourishing, and moving? Cheng Ling's sharp spirit of folding willows by the court can be a sword is not an exaggeration to say that he stands out among the refugees. So much so that Genie couldn't help but doubt her background at this moment. This kid shouldn't actually be from someone else's background, right? If that's the case, this is the flaw caused by being too shrewd. If it were a bit more reckless, even if Cheng Ling appeared different in temperament, what would happen? No matter how spirited you are still a dirty and poor boy. Who cares about you? Kujini has always been cautious and thoughtful. The more he looks at Cheng Ling, the more suspicious he becomes in his heart. Invisibly, his bottom line is receding. Cheng Ling said, according to the rules, since I am here, there is no reason for my aunt next door to make the decision to buy my sister. As for my sister herself, this is also the case. Since my brother is here, what can she do with what she says? As soon as she spoke, her tone remained calm and steady, imitating the tone of ancient vernacular novels, making her look even less like a vulgar commoner. As for belittling Cheng Danny in words, there is no need to take it too seriously. Jin Yi raised his eyebrows slightly and said in a low voice, "Young brother, think deeply. Remember, in this world, you protect people and think you are good to them, but you never thought that the outside world is like a raging sand. In a few days, even the best people will wither away. Why bother?" He described the world outside as a raging sand, and Cheng Ling slowly said, "It would be better for the branches to hold incense and die, than to ever fall into the north wind." Jin Yi was shocked and said solemnly, "Have you ever read a book, young brother?" Lu Shi, who was watching the two of them talking slowly next door, couldn't bear it anymore. She held it back for a long time and finally screamed at this moment, "What's dead and alive? Kill 1,000 knives. Linga, you can't do this. If you don't sell the anai, how can you return my food?" As she spoke, she even started crying and howling, "You can't, you're taking my life." While crying, she took a step forward, her short and sturdy figure stomping on the ground with a sound, as if she was about to pounce on Cheng Ling. Jin Ye's gaze flickered, only to see Cheng Ling suddenly raise his hand. A cold light suddenly flashed by at this moment, and Lu Shi, who was rushing towards her, felt a gust of wind shooting towards her, causing a pain in her neck. A piercing chill flowed down her neck, and Lu shook her legs, unable to walk. She instinctively just raised her hand and wiped it around her neck, only to see a bright red stain on her fingers. Lu Shi. Ah! Killing someone. With a blink of an eye, he collapsed. At this moment, the piece of broken porcelain flying over Lu's neck had just shot a few meters away, at the feet of Jin Yi. With a snatch sound, the porcelain pieces fell to the ground. The remaining sharp corners above still sway slightly. The new book has been released. This time, I am trying to explore the theme of escaping from famine and also writing about the Chinese martial arts youth, girl, in my heart. The silver saddle shines on the white horse, rustling like a shooting star. Kill one person in 10 steps, leaving no trace for 1,000 miles. This must be an interesting soul, full of personal charm. It will be very exciting, new and old friends, don't forget to click on a bookmark. Thank you for your support. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Sorry, I'm just a big scammer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Sorry, I'm just a big scammer. The scene was completely silent. Jin Ye's face turned slightly blue for a while. After a moment, he adjusted his gaze on his own, but suddenly opened his mouth and smiled, "Okay. Little brother, you have great skills." After speaking, he raised his hand again and gave a thumbs up, saying, "It's even more impressive. I, Lao Jin, admire people with integrity the most in my life. You little brother, I'll make friends with you. Since we are friends, there is no need to buy someone else's sister." However, Jin Yi didn't know what to say. People in his profession need to pay attention to their appearance. Cheng Ling raised his hand and clasped his fist, then smiled slightly and said, "Brother Jin is bold and straightforward." This sentence from Brother Jin immediately made Mr. Jin burst into laughter. Cheng Ling raised his hand and gestured to the side, saying, "Brother Jin, how about taking a step to speak?" Jin Yi touched his little beard and said, "Oh." Cheng Ling's posture remained unchanged, and her smile was extremely graceful. Jin Yi walked over with his foot raised. There were thugs around him who seemed to want to stop him, as well as those who tried to keep up with him. However, he waved his hand and impatiently said, "All right, my little brother, the heroic youth, you need to defend yourself." As he spoke, he walked up to Cheng Ling himself. Cheng Ling raised his hand and gestured, "Brother Jin, please." The two of them took a few more steps to the side and happened to come to the edge of a dilapidated shed. This is actually the shed of Cheng Ling's family. There were originally several refugees gathered around to watch the excitement, but when they walked over, these refugees immediately avoided each other. There was a peaceful area around the two of them. Jin Yi glanced at the shed and saw that it was low and cramped, not even as tall as a person. It was only supported by a few pieces of wood and some dry grass. A grass curtain hangs down from the front, as if it were a door. This situation, to say that poverty is an insult to poverty, has reached a certain level of nothing. He looked at Cheng Ling again, but Cheng Ling's expression was very calm. She didn't even say a word like, "You're laughing," but suddenly lowered her voice and said, "Brother Jin, listen to my advice, don't come out of the city to do business again in the next few days, it's dangerous." As soon as these words were spoken, Jin Ye's expression changed instantly. He looked at Cheng Ling with a scrutinizing gaze and said in a deep voice, "What are you saying?" Cheng Ling said quietly, "Brother Jin, I'm not alarmist. As you can see, there are more and more refugees gathered outside the city, but there is no answer in the city. Recently, even the shed for kanji has been evacuated." At this point, she paused and then said, "So many refugees gathered outside the city, not to be eaten, not to be allowed to enter the city, that's just a fire bucket." Cheng Ling looked at Mr. Jin with a, "Brother Jin, you understand," gaze, which was already full of clarity. Jin Ye's mind was spinning as he blurted out, "Is it intentional inside?" Cheng Ling nodded, his expression very solemn, and he only said in his heart, "This is what you said, I didn't say anything. Are the people in this city intentional? Because we can't provide relief to so many disaster victims, why don't we just cover up there and do nothing, forcing them into chaos, and then come out to drive away the rioters with good reputation and righteousness? By the way, get rid of this burden." Cheng Ling didn't know, she knew too little information to analyze the specific situation here, but it didn't prevent her from deceiving Jin Yi. However, Jin Yi realized it and quickly stopped speaking, saying, "Good brother. I remember your situation, brother. You just need to wait, and Jin will definitely repay you later." After speaking, I lifted my feet and hurriedly left. Cheng Ling bowed to him, and Jin Yi greeted the thugs. He took a few steps forward, then turned around and also bowed to Cheng Ling. I really left with a group of subordinates. After he left, the refugees who were watching next to him either whispered, loudly, numbly, or excitedly dispersed their discussions. Of course, it is said to be scattered in all directions, but in fact, the area outside the city is only so large. Thousands of refugees gather here, who can't see who. Cheng Ling could still feel that there were many gazes, intentionally or unintentionally, projecting onto her side. Some people quietly pointed at Lu, who was still lying on the ground, but no one came to care about the specific situation of this person. Cheng Ernie was very excited and rushed to Cheng Ling's side in a hurry. She grabbed her arm and exclaimed excitedly, "Brother Ling, you're just..." She didn't know how to describe her feelings, but felt that her suddenly awakened younger brother was so powerful that it was as if he had received divine enlightenment in this moment. Especially magical, especially surprising. But Cheng Ernie's thinking was simple, and she couldn't guess if Cheng Ling had switched to someone else. She was just filled with excitement and excitement. "I just feel that since the escape. No, it seems like I haven't had as much fun as I did before, even since I had memories." In her own barren language, she finally blurted out, "Linga, I feel like I'm going to heaven now." Cheng Danny also walked over, but her expression was much more complicated, with joy and hidden worries. Just as he said, "Brother Ling, you're protecting Big Sister is happy. But what about the food? Auntie." Before he could finish speaking, a person hurriedly walked towards the direction of the nearby forest and stopped in his footsteps when he saw Lu Shi lying on the ground. After a moment, he adjusted his expression and rushed to Lu's side. He squatted down and let out a mournful cry, "Child, his mother." As he looked up, he looked at Cheng Ling with an angry and disappointed expression, and said in pain, "Brother Ling, no matter how hard it is, this is also your aunt. How could you be so ruthless in this heart? Your hand is too black, it's so black against everyone in your family. You. Cheng Ling interrupted, Uncle, Auntie is fine, it's just a slight skin injury. The reason why I'm lying on the ground is because Auntie's body is too heavy to rest on. Uncle Cheng. Isn't this a disguised mockery of Lu's being too strong? Although Uncle Cheng sometimes feels a bit disdainful, being said by Cheng Ling still makes Uncle Cheng feel strange and uncomfortable all over. Hey! Not right. What is he coming to do? Before Uncle Cheng could muster up his energy to fight again, Cheng Ling also walked up to Lu's side. She also crouched down, reached out a hand, and accurately pinched the center of Lu's body like lightning. Lu sure. Ouch. He jumped up in pain, his agile body like a chubby fish bouncing from the water to the ground. Uncle Cheng was caught off guard and was startled. With a flick of his foot, he suddenly sat down on the ground and fell into a fight. Cheng Ernie chuckled. Cheng Ling said slowly, Uncle, my nephew has one more thing to ask Uncle. Uncle's mother is going to sell my sister just now. Where has Uncle gone? Uncle Cheng was stunned when suddenly asked again, and instinctively replied, What? Your aunt wants to sell Dai. This is not possible. This mother-in-law is so outrageous, I don't agree. Oh, Uncle doesn't agree, Cheng Ling Dao said. But I have two older sisters, how does Uncle know that Uncle Nyang is selling my older sister? Uncle Cheng opened his mouth, propping himself on the ground with one hand and supporting his head with the other, just staring at Cheng Ling. Cheng Ling said again, also, since Uncle was not here just now, how did he know that Uncle Nyang's skin injury was accidentally caused by his nephew? Uncle Cheng. However, Lu finally regained her senses from the near-death fear she had just experienced, and now, with one hand on her waist, she habitually resorted to using a shrewd tactic. Cheng Ling, however, pushed forward and suddenly raised her hand to press against the scar on the side of Lu's neck. Thank you all for your enthusiastic support. I have seen all the comments and authors, so please reply here. A few questions. 1. About the golden finger. The golden finger is the type that appears ordinary and popular at first, but becomes more interesting later on. Specific to what it is, let's not spoil it for now. 2. Does the male lead know martial arts? Yes, but the emotional line won't be clear from the beginning. It's a bit special because the female lead will dress up as a man for a long time. Of course, this won't affect the excitement of the plot, so don't worry. After all, what we cannot lack in our lives is definitely pursuing a career. After having a career, love will always be more fragrant, right? Of course, it can also be seen as bilinear parallel, and I will grasp the balance well. 3. Does the world love the female lead? Having a confidant all over the world doesn't mean everyone loves the female lead. It's normal for someone with personality charm to have many good friends. But this is not a romantic relationship, so everyone doesn't have to worry about mindless Mary Sue. You should be able to believe in the literary works of Fishing for Snow. 4. About the Jianghu. Wherever there are people, there is the martial arts world. In fact, the martial arts world is more about that kind of tone, which is in our hearts. The main theme of this article is the infrastructure for farming in the wilderness. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Although the golden finger is late, it arrives. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Although the golden finger is late, it arrives. Cheng Ling reached out and pressed down on Lu's wound. This scar is indeed very shallow, that is, it has broken a little skin and shed a little blood. By this time, the blood has naturally stopped. But at the moment when Cheng Ling pressed on top, Lu still felt a sharp piercing pain. The familiar fear struck again, and Lu froze instantly. Especially though Cheng Ling has not yet grown up, in terms of height, she is even slightly taller than her. These height differences in Su gave Lu a sense of threat from being watched from a high position by Cheng Ling. Cheng Ling whispered, Auntie wouldn't think that the skin injury just now was due to my nephew's lack of strength, so it was just a skin injury, right? Lu's legs trembled a bit and she said sternly, "What do you want to do?" "I'm your aunt, yes, I'm your elder. Don't go too far." Cheng Ling smiled and said, "Don't say it's Uncle Nyang from the next room, it's also Uncle Nyang." "So what? In this world, all the etiquette and ups and downs are in chaos. Uncle Nyang, don't push me too hard, otherwise, this porcelain piece won't just lightly scratch your neck next time." Lu looked at her smile, but only felt a chill rush from the middle of her neck towards both sides. Cheng Ling took a step back, and Lu suddenly felt a sense of danger as she managed to escape from the claws of a fierce beast. Who dares to entangle more now? Just pulled Uncle Cheng, who was still sitting on the ground, and ran. "Uncle Cheng. Oh my. Can't you be so gentle, you mother-in-law. Lu sure. Lightly, you're a coward. I've had 8 lifetimes of bad luck marrying you. I've been walking around, and I don't know why your old Cheng family has suffered such an injustice." The two of them gradually drifted away, blending into the refugee group and reaching the area closer to the city gate. The shed over there is not as crowded as the surrounding area, with more sturdy materials and often occupying a larger area. Generally, it is more powerful, and only refugees with more strong families can live there. Previously, every morning and evening, there would be large families in the city to set up kanji sheds to provide kanji, and these refugees closer to the city gate would also be able to grab kanji first. The shed of Cheng Ling's family is located on the outermost edge of the refugee gathering area, farthest from the city gate. If we go further, we will enter the mountains. It is difficult to grab kanji at this position, but there are many insects and snakes on the mountainside. At night, the howling wind and the flying mosquitoes made people feel extremely distressed. But these are nothing. The most desperate thing is that in the last 2 days, the city has not even put kanji. This summer flood, the Jinshui River broke its embankment, and the Taiban area of Yunchuan County was hit by disasters, causing refugees to flee in all directions. Cheng Ling and his family are from Meihua village in Lu County, so they chose a route heading north. After walking for more than 20 days, the surrounding area was first crowded with villagers. Then, the people who fled along the way died and scattered. Gradually, more fresh faces appeared next to them. Upon arriving in Pingxian, only Uncle Cheng's family remained among the familiar people around him. However, although both sides are of the same ethnicity, they have been separated from each other since Grandpa Cheng Ling's generation. When they were still in Plum Blossom Village, there was not much closeness between the two sides. When they were on their way to escape, Uncle Cheng's family was even more afraid that Cheng Ling's family would take advantage of them. So, things like helping each other didn't happen much, and there were quite a few instances of oppression. There is no need to elaborate on these things too much. In short, Cheng Ling has fused the memories of the original owner since crossing over. Now she gradually recalls various information in her memory and has a clear idea of what to do now. Cheng Ernie watched as Lu and Uncle Cheng went far away, gave a soft moan, and then smiled happily. "Linga, you are really amazing." Cheng Danny's face also showed a slight smile, but she sighed again. "Without food to eat, what's the use of taking this breath?" As she spoke, she walked directly to the edge of her own shack, lifted the grass curtain, and bent down to enter. Cheng Ernie stroked and squeezed her eyes, then quickly followed suit, and Cheng Ling naturally followed suit. The shack was built low, about 4 feet high, and people couldn't stand up straight inside. The interior space is also very narrow, about 3 square meters. There are some tattered things piled up in the corner, and there is actually a person curled up next to this pile of tattered things. This person is their mother, Mu Sanyang. Mu Sanyang is a tall woman with a large skeleton, long hands and feet, curled up on a pile of tattered clothes, her eyes tightly closed, her face waxy yellow, and her lips pale. Just looking at her, one can imagine how agonizing she is at this moment. Cheng Danny looked at her, her eyelids trembling, and 2 tears fell from the corners of her eyes. But she just pursed her lips and didn't wipe the tears from her face, so she bent over and walked to the pile of junk next to her. Then he dug and dug from the bottom, and finally, he pulled out a thick porcelain bowl with a missing mouth. When I opened a piece of grey cloth wrapped in a thick bowl, I saw that there was half a bowl of thick congee that had been cold enough to congeal. Cheng Ling suddenly exclaimed in shock, "Sister, how could you still?" Cheng Ling quickly reached out to cover Cheng Ling's mouth. Cheng Ling also woke up and immediately closed her mouth in frustration. Cheng Danny whispered. "Every time we receive congee, my wife and I will keep some secretly. This half bowl was left the day before yesterday. After that, no distinguished person came out to give congee in the city. The half bowl of congee left the day before yesterday was not only frozen into a lump by this time, but even a layer of yellow water separated from it. In this small shack, cold congee exudes an unspeakable sour taste. But Cheng Danny cherishes this very much, and only says, 'My mother can't wake up. She is designated to be hungry. Although she wants me to keep food for a few days, she must not touch the congee until Brother Ling can't support it, but—' At this point, she looked at Cheng Ling and pleaded in her voice, 'Brother Ling, let's give it to Auntie first. She's the one who can't hold on anymore.' Cheng Ling. I felt like something was blocking my throat, and a feeling of sadness and discomfort surged out of my bones. She took a gentle breath and didn't say anything like, 'This congee is too bad to eat.' Instead, she squatted beside Mu Sanyang and raised her hand to the pulse gate of her left hand. With such a gentle probing of the pulse, combined with the original memory, Cheng Ling Dun had a clear idea. She whispered, 'What Auntie needs more is medication. But where to find medicine?' Cheng Ling, who has been well organized since his time traveling, feels that he has already controlled his emotions extremely well. At this moment, he cannot help but feel confused. Her gaze pierced through the cracks of the dilapidated shack, contemplating the possibility of going into the mountain to gather medicine in search for food, when suddenly she felt a flash of light in front of her. Not quite right. Wait, what did she see? A small, pitch-black space that looked like there was no light appeared before her. And surprisingly, even though the space was dark, she was able to see every item in it clearly. What are all these things? Small steel cup, alcohol furnace, water purification tablets, compressed biscuits, dehydrated vegetables. Cheng Ling. It's a very ordinary small space, but it's a bit mysterious. It's not like traditional spaces. Don't worry, friends. We will find its fun later, #carrot. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Supplies from Hiking Backpack. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Supplies from Hiking Backpack. Cheng Ling's heart was filled with ups and downs, and surprisingly, a small space appeared. Is this the standard configuration for time travel? She glanced at Cheng Danny and Cheng Ling, making sure they couldn't see the space, and then quickly observed the small space with her eyes. First, visually measure the volume. Roughly speaking, it should be around 1 cubic meter. Small is really small, and there are not many materials loaded inside, but the advantage lies in the rich variety. In addition to the compressed biscuits and other items she had seen before, there were also supplies such as a compass, map, insulated kettle, outdoor watch, small telescope, composite crossbow, military knife, and refined steel longquan sword. These seemed to be things she put in her backpack before traveling because she was going to participate in a wilderness survival activity. Most importantly, there is also a small first aid medicine box inside. Great. This thing is obviously a more precious life-saving item than food in this era. Cheng Ling immediately said to the two sisters, "Big sister, I actually hid some things outside before. Wait a moment, I'll go and get them now." Previously, due to a lack of food, the original owner did explore a nearby mountain forest. She just turned around at the foot of the mountain and fainted in front of her two sisters when she returned. Seeing her younger brother faint again, Cheng Danny was desperate at the time. It was too difficult to live, so she was willing to sell herself for food. After Cheng Ling suddenly woke up, although Cheng Danny was pleasantly surprised, the worry of not being able to exchange food still weighed down her face. She frowned and said, "What did you hide? Why didn't you bring it back before?" Cheng Ling raised a finger and made a hissing gesture, but only smiled. Then she got up and bent down, then lifted the grass curtain and walked out. After leaving, she deliberately pinched her legs and pretended to be in a hurry to urinate, rushing towards the nearby mountains and forests. In the refugee group, many eyes immediately turned to them. Cheng Ling's performance in dealing with Jin Yi was too conspicuous, and refugees would either intentionally or unintentionally pay more attention to her. Cheng Ling had a clear understanding of this, so she deliberately pretended to be in urgent need of urination. Fortunately, their shack was close to the mountains and forests, and Cheng Ling Kai only ran a dozen meters before reaching the foot of the mountain. She climbed a few steps, found a large stone, and flashed to the back of the stone. Cheng Ling scrutinized for a moment and confirmed that there was no one around. Only then did he gather his energy and try to retrieve something from the small space he had just seen. Just now while running, she had already noticed that this small portable space could disappear and appear according to her own thoughts. When she didn't think about it, it seemed like it didn't exist. Only when Cheng Ling concentrates her mind and meditates on the space, will the space appear in her field of vision. Cheng Ling's gaze fell on the small medicine box in the space, and her thoughts were very strong. She kept silently saying, "Come out, come out." The next moment, her palm sank. The small medicine box has indeed been summoned. Cheng Ling's heart suddenly relaxed slightly. Even if there were expectations, it was still a pleasant surprise at this moment. She was actually worried about whether the space could be seen or not just now, and now that she has confirmed that the materials inside can be easily taken out, the aura in her heart is much relieved. Opening the small medicine box, I saw that it was divided into 3 layers from top to bottom. According to functional zoning, each layer was divided into several storage compartments. The things inside are packed tightly, and it can be said that although the sparrow is small, it has all 5 internal organs. The main supplies include 2 pairs of disposable latex gloves, 1 pair of scissors and forceps, 1 set of suture needles and surgical knives, 1 set of cold and hot dressings, and the rest, such as tourniquets, medical gauze, alcohol cotton pads, iodine, etc., which will not be described in detail. The most precious thing is that there are also 2 first aid treasures, an gong niu huan wan and 2 boxes of Yunnan Baiyao, in this medicine box. In addition, there are 2 boxes of anti-inflammatory drug amoxicillin, 10 small packages of compound banlangen, 2 boards of Niuhuang Jiedu tablets, 2 boxes of Lianhua Qingwen capsules, 10 small packages of ibuprofen granules, and 1 box of painkillers. There is also 1 bottle each of Hulua oil, Fenjiujing, and Weiniing pain-relieving cream. The volume of the cooling oil is particularly small, so I brought 5 small boxes, and Ren Danwan brought 10 small packages. Cheng Ling quickly looked through it, and after knowing it, she took a separate box of Yunnan Baiyao, as well as a separate portion of Qingliang oil and Rendan pills. Then he closed the medicine box and silently recited in his heart, "Go back." In such a moment of thought, the medicine box was indeed taken back into space. Cheng Ling unpacked Yunnan Baiyao again, took out the safety cover from the bottle cap, and then returned the Yunnan Baiyao that had been removed with the safety cover to the space. Cool oil and Rendan pills are also sent back to space in the same way. These things are all very small in size and have been taken out of the small medicine box. They can be stored separately in the space, making it convenient for her to sneak in at any time when she needs them next time. Then, Cheng Ling took out 2 compressed biscuits from the space. This is a military compressed biscuit, each piece is only half the size of a palm, but the heat is extremely high. 1 piece can meet the energy needs of adults for a day and a night. Cheng Ling brought a total of 15 compressed biscuits like this. First, take out 2 pieces. After removing the outer packaging, Cheng Ling still took the packaging back into space, and also took the unpacked cookies back into space. He walked out from behind the stone with an empty-handed appearance. After taking a few steps, Cheng Ling suddenly stopped again. It turned out that a man had walked out from the refugee group ahead. This man looks in his early 20s, with a quite imposing figure. If it weren't for his waxen complexion, he wouldn't have looked like a refugee. Next to the man was a young man with agile eyebrows and eyes. The young man extended his finger and pointed at Cheng Ling from a distance. The 2 of them were talking, saying something, and then walked towards Cheng Ling together. Cheng Ling anticipated that the 2 of them had something to do, so she paused and focused only on her own shack more than 10 meters away, ensuring that she could take care of her family in the shack within her own line of sight. After waiting for a moment, the man and the boy walked over. The young man arched his hand with a smile and said, "Brother Cheng, this is the leader of our 10-mile Fortress 100 family team, led by Guoda. Both of you are heroes and should have known each other." Without hitting the smiling person, Cheng Ling responded with a fist, but only smiled without speaking. What kind of heroes? Just looking at the walking posture of these 2 people, Cheng Ling knew that the young man who spoke was at most an ordinary person with malnutrition. As for Guoda, who was in charge, he probably practiced some farming skills. Cheng Ling didn't know if there were any heroic deeds of this person, but from the beginning of the young man's speech, Cheng Ling could smell something different. She doesn't look down on anyone, she's afraid that these 2 newcomers are not good. Sure enough, when he saw her not speaking, the head of the Guo family frowned impatiently. He looked at Cheng Ling with a scrutinizing gaze and an undisclosed dissatisfaction. Cheng Ling didn't know where his emotions came from, so he remained calm and adaptable to all changes. The atmosphere became a bit awkward. After a moment, the young man suddenly cleared his throat and chuckled, saying, "Brother Cheng, our current situation is not easy." Cheng Ling, oh. She was so ungrateful, and Guoda's expression as the head of the household began to become somewhat gloomy. "Hey." The young man gritted his teeth and said, "Brother Cheng, how many wealthy and powerful officials are eating big fish and meat in that city? We suffering brothers are so hungry that we can't even catch a few grains of rice. Can this be done? It's unreasonable." As the words fell, at that moment, Cheng Ling understood. When she fooled Jin Yi earlier, the nonsense of civil unrest might be right in front of her. These days, collections have been on the rise, recommendations have been increasing, and some friends have also submitted monthly tickets and given tips for their new books. I have received your encouragement to fish for snow. Thank you very much. Now I am full of motivation. Mua, end of this chapter. Chapter 5. Showcasing skills between square inches. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Showcasing skills between square inches. Cheng Ling's heart thumped a little. Civil unrest. These 2 people are here to invite her to join the company. Of course, Cheng Ling cannot agree. 2 of you. Cheng Ling's tone was calm and gentle, only saying, "My mother is weak, and I can't afford to delay here. I must hurry back to take care of her as soon as possible. Goodbye." As she spoke, her hand arched, and she made a mistake as she quickly walked around these 2 people and left. The best way to not get involved is to not even listen to their words anymore. At this moment, a hand reached out. Guo, the head of the household, exhaled and shouted angrily, "Good kid, it's not that easy to leave." As he spoke, his open fingers curved into eagle claws and he grabbed Cheng Ling's head. His body collided with the front at the same time, and his 2 thick legs were stepping on the ground, kicking and kicking. Not to mention anything else, the strength displayed during this run alone was very frightening. Cheng Ling is not short in stature, but extremely thin. Compared to this strong man, how can he be compared? If this is hit, it is possible to vomit blood on the spot. Guodajia's face showed a ferocious smile, but Cheng Ling's figure was flexible beyond his imagination. She just turned her body to one side, and at the moment when Guo, the leader, couldn't stop running, she suddenly reached out another hand. This hand was pinched on the extended arm of the head of the Guo family, directly gripping the Chu-Zhe acupoint on his upper arm. Guo, the head of the family, immediately understood what it meant to be half of the body numb. He felt a shock in his heart, but before he could react, Cheng Ling took another step and bullied him behind his back, then tapped his back at the acupoint of his neck. Yong Chun, inch strength. Within an inch, an extremely cohesive force rushed forward in an instant. With a loud, ah, Guo finally felt a sharp pain in his spine, and then Cheng Ling kicked him in the knee bend. Bang! The strong man stumbled and fell to the ground, like a fish out of water, flapping and unable to flip over again. Cheng Ling lifted one foot and lightly tapped the central point of Guo Dedang's vest with the tip of his foot. Guo, the head of the household, felt that the pressure on his vest was not just a gentle toe. That's like a big mountain. Everything rises and falls rapidly. On the other hand, the young man who was watching finally woke up from his daze. He hurriedly took a deep breath and hesitated for a moment between running away immediately and coming forward to save the person. After all, he reluctantly took a step, stiffened his face, and chuckled dryly, well. Hee, Brother Cheng, what do you mean by this? Cheng Ling stared at him without making a sound. After seeing this person's face turn pale, he slowly said, tell me your name and background. Ah. The young man swallowed his saliva and fidgeted anxiously, saying quickly, little brother. Cough, the little one is also from Shilibo, from the east and east of Linxian County. The little one's name is Liang Erju, and there is an 80-year-old mother at home. Woo-woo. Speaking of which, Liang Erju found the right state. He cried and wiped away his tears, brother, we are really not easy. Even if I and Brother Guo have a temper, they are not bad people. I'm not a bad person either. Brother Cheng, what are you doing? No, it's really not like this. We used to have no grudges, but now we have no grudges. Brother Cheng, please lift your feet. Cheng Ling sighed and said, there was indeed no grudge in the past. As for whether there will be any grudges in the near future. Haha. She smiled and said, I remember the names of the Liang brothers. I also trouble the Liang brothers to advise and persuade Guo to be the head of the family. I don't care what you want to do, I don't know what you want to do. Cheng has only one request, don't blame me for anything. As she spoke, she suddenly exerted a slight force on her toes at the acupoint on Guo Dedang's vest. Guo, the head of the household, was originally struggling to support the ground with both hands and didn't want to lie down too unsightly. However, when Cheng Ling exerted this force, his vest suddenly felt a sharp pain. At this moment, he let out his breath and couldn't help but groan in pain. His face turned red and he wished there was a hole on the ground, so he could easily bury his head and face together. Cheng Ling's voice was calm and steady, okay, don't provoke me. We're all good. If anyone provokes me, what's the point of a few lives in this world? Finally, after saying this sentence, she withdrew her foot. Mr. Guo, who was lying on the ground, felt his back loosen. After a moment, he heard footsteps gradually fading away. He suddenly took a breath, and his first reaction was to want to just lie on the ground and not get up, regardless of whether it was shameful or deadly. Anyway, let's cry a lot first. Woo-woo. Liang Erju came to pull him, but Guo Dejia, with mixed cries, refused to get up. He only covered his sleeve and tugged at Liang Erju, saying, so, did that kid really go far? Liang Erju said cautiously with an angry voice, go far, big brother, get up quickly. I'll block you, no one dares to look at us. Ah, Cheng Ling shook his head and laughed heartily. She walked to the edge of her own shack, and before lifting the grass curtain, she glanced at the direction of the mountains and forests with the corner of her eye. She saw Liang Erju pulling Guo as the head of the household, and the two of them hunched over, not knowing what they were hiding from, so they walked around the mountains and forests. Little did they know that their location was actually unobstructed. In the refugee area here, anyone who looked over there could basically see them. Who else can we avoid? Probably just seeking psychological comfort. As for Cheng Ling's side, she even brought down the leader Gua, so now there are fewer refugees who dare to keep an eye on her. Her gaze only needed to be swept casually, and anyone around her who met her gaze would quickly bow their heads. This deterrent effect is really very good. Cheng Ling then lifted the curtain and bent back to her own shack. In the shack, Cheng Danny and Cheng Ernie are surrounding Mu Sanyang. Cheng Ernie holds Mu Sanyang's upper body and holds her up. Cheng Danny carefully feeds kanji to Mu Sanyang. However, Mu Sanyang didn't open her mouth at all. She even clenched her teeth and hid from kanji. It is evident that her consciousness is not completely unconscious. In this way, she is willing to leave all the food for the child, but she is unwilling to take even a bite. Cheng Danny's tears welled up and she said, "Auntie, you eat. Do you eat well? We can't do without you." Mu Sanyang remained silent when Cheng Ling walked over. She crouched in front of Mu Sanyang and gently brushed her lips with her hand. At the same time, her hand lightly tapped the acupoint on Mu Sanyang's cheek. Mu Sanyang unconsciously opened her mouth slightly, and a small Yunnan Baiyao insurance seed that was only the size of a mung bean was fed into Mu Sanyang's mouth by Cheng Ling. All this happened so fast that Cheng Ling acted like a lightning bolt. When she fed the medicine, Cheng Danny and Cheng Ernie's sisters didn't even see what she had just done. Two sisters, just one of them said, "Brother Ling, you are back." A startled person said, "Linga, you." Before she could finish speaking, Mu Sanyang, who had been keeping her eyes closed, suddenly let out a moan and opened them. Seeking follow-up reading, especially during the new book period, determines the fate of this book. Please don't forget me, my friends. As we continue to read, the author will ensure daily updates without interruption, #carrot. End of this chapter. Why do you want to laugh when you should be sad in Chapter 6? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Why do you want to laugh when you should be sad in Chapter 6? Mu Sanyang is awake. Cheng Danny and Cheng Ernie exclaimed in surprise, "Auntie." Mu Sanyang opened her eyes and her gaze hesitated slightly before finally turning to Cheng Ling. She asked, "Brother Ling, you just gave me something to eat, what?" Cheng Ling didn't expect her hazy appearance to even notice the insurance she had just eaten. Yes, there is a hint of bitterness and medicinal taste in the insurance. Mu Sanyang is not a fool, how could she not feel anything unusual? Fortunately, Cheng Ling had already figured out an excuse to deal with it and said, "It's Bai Bao Dan, Auntie. I exchanged it with Jin Yi with a message." Jin Yi. Mu Sanyang's voice suddenly rose, and in a hurry, she even sat up with her hands propped up. Although she was unconscious for most of the day and didn't know about Cheng Danny's plan to exchange food for herself, she had long heard of this Golden Lord. A few days ago, Jin Yi often went out of the city and picked out some neat-looking girls to buy back into the city. In the refugee area outside the city, he is a famous figure. Therefore, when Cheng Ling mentioned Jin Yi, Mu Sanyang became anxious, afraid that the children at home would do something foolish. Cheng Ling quickly lowered his voice and explained, "Auntie, Gua, the head of our household here, intends to lead someone to rush towards the city gate. I used this news to exchange with Jin Yi for a life-saving pill. She has the memory of the original owner, so Mu Sanyang is very kind. At this time, her voice is also very smooth, and there is no psychological barrier." However, Mu Sanyang was stunned by the news in her mouth for a moment. Unconsciously, Mu Sanyang reached out and grabbed Cheng Ling's hand, staring at her closely. She asked, "Brother Ling, where did you get the news? Can you confirm?" Cheng Ling said, "It was before that there was a man named Liang Erju next to the head of Gua's family who told me personally. I am the only male servant in our family, and if they want to gather refugees, they must communicate with the male servants from various families. Mu Sanyang suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. The names of Guadajia and Liang Erju came out, and Cheng Ling was so true. Where is Mu Sanyang still not believing them at the moment? Her mood fluctuated for a moment. Originally, she was weak during the illness, but the insurance not only saved her internal injuries but also had a powerful analgesic effect. After a while, the pain on Mu Sanyang's body gradually subsided, and she regained her spirits. She quickly said, "No, we can't stay in this place anymore. Linga, Danny, we need to leave here quickly." When she spoke, her expression was firm, indicating that she had already made up her mind in just a moment. After saying this, she asked Cheng Ling again, "Brother Ling, how did you answer Liang Erju when he came to find you?" Cheng Ling looked at Mu Sanyang and saw that although her face was dull and haggard, there was a hint of determination in her expression. This is an ordinary ancient woman who looks no different from the general laboring masses. But she was a widow in her youth, able to pull and raise her 3 children independently, and also to do things like raising her youngest daughter as a son, keeping everyone hidden and not revealing anything. You can imagine how unusual she is actually. For Cheng Ling, this is certainly excellent. The road ahead is difficult, having such a teammate is also a kind of luck, isn't it? She whispered, "Auntie, don't worry, let's wait until it gets dark before we leave." As she spoke, she made a gesture of taking something out of her arms, but in reality, she quietly communicated and took the compressed biscuit that had just been torn off the packaging into her palm. When he opened his palm again, Cheng Ling's palm had an additional compressed biscuit with a slightly yellow color and a hint of food aroma. Gudong, Cheng Ernie swallowed her saliva. She just listened to the conversation between her younger brother and mother, and didn't react to the news that someone was going to break through the city gate. However, the appearance of this compressed biscuit instantly broke her defense. Fragrant, so fragrant. In fact, the smell of compressed biscuits is not very obvious, but for people in extreme hunger, even the faintest food smell can attract their saliva to secrete wildly. Moreover, compressed biscuits contain a large amount of oil and sugar. After Cheng Ling spread out his palm, the food aroma mixed with the smell of sugar and oil penetrated into the noses of several people around him. Cheng Ernie not only swallowed her saliva, but also her eyes turned green. Mu Sanyang still retained a bit of rationality, and she reluctantly asked, "Brother Ling, what is this?" Cheng Ling Dao said, "Earlier, I found a small bundle in the mountains and forests, which contained some dry food like this. Auntie, let's share it first, accumulate some strength, and leave when it gets dark." After speaking, she reached out and broke the small compressed biscuit into 4 pieces. I left one for myself, and handed the remaining 3 to Mu Sanyang and 2 sisters respectively. 4 people, 1 person eats a small piece. This is not that Cheng Ling is stingy, mainly because the digestive systems of the mother and daughter are in a long-term state of hunger. In this situation, it is not advisable to eat too much at once after starting the meal. Compressed biscuits are inherently full and difficult to digest. Eating a small piece at a time can provide some energy for their dry bodies, which is enough. Of course, Cheng Ling also has material considerations. Although she has obtained a small golden finger space, the resources in this space are limited, with only 15 compressed biscuits in total. Cheng Ling cannot squander it and must use it in a planned manner. Cheng Ernie didn't have any extra thoughts, she just had one thought. Eat. When she finished her food with a sip of water and a bite of biscuits, she eagerly went to see Cheng Danny and Mu Sanyang. Cheng Ling's eating speed is also very fast, just like her. Cheng Ling had already eaten up the small biscuit with water. Cheng Danny and Mu Sanyang are slower, both of them have the same mindset and want to keep some of this precious food. That's right, the taste of compressed biscuits may be criticized by many people in modern society. It can be eaten by refugees like Cheng Danny and Mu Sanyang, with a salty and sweet taste mixed with a nutty and oily flavor. It feels like a fairy eating it with a mouthful full of carbon water. Not to mention during the escape, even before the escape, when their families were still stable, they had never eaten such food. The mother and daughter tried to restrain themselves with great will, but their hungry and thirsty bodies were not under their rational control. When they regained their senses, Cheng Danny and Mu Sanyang found that even if they chewed slowly, they had eaten all the food in their hands. Cheng Danny. Tears welled up in Cheng Danny's eyes. Big sister. Cheng Ernie was also wiping away her tears as she asked, "Why are you crying?" Cheng Danny belched inexplicably and then covered her face with shame. She suddenly turned her back and said with great sadness, "I didn't leave any dry food," sob. "I was wrong." Cheng Ernie's tears became even more joyful, and she also cried, "Yes, I should have left some. This delicious thing will never be eaten again in the future. What should I do?" Woo 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 woo. Cheng Ling. What should we do? Why did she suddenly feel like laughing despite such a sad situation? Sigh. Since the book was opened, I have received many rewards and encouragement, which is very touching. Thank you all for your support. Here is a list of rewards. Thank you for Miracle Life 123, the autumn wind rises and yellow flowers are thin and carefree, cloth is 1502, the summer flowers are brilliant, meaning the hall master, I dance and see, the death of time, the flying dragon, the sweeping monk of the bombing heavenly sect, the Chin water meow, ping 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 huan huan, Mrs. 511, the person who combs the blue lake and chops firewood, AlphaGo. The small building was unified last night, QWAS 12, a high school student in 1998, book friend 26169, a pot of turbid wine crossing the fleeting year, dance and green competition, book friend 35172, Wu Hong, Taurus Edward, which little cookie are you? Book friend 102151, dedicated to black and white, Earth's Meow and Meow Divine Cult, last night's star, last night's book. Thank you all, and thank you to all the collectors and reviewers who recommended monthly tickets for this book. You have made me feel recognized and given me unlimited confidence. Clench your fists, cheer up, the author is full of bacterial energy. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Night of Terror. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Night of Terror. At the hour of Su, the sky gradually darkened. Cheng Ling carefully observed the surroundings again through the cracks in her own shack. There is no moon in the sky, and the starlight is also very sparse. The hazy night blurred everything, including the various hardships and winds in the refugee area outside the city, as if they had been extinguished into a tranquility with the sunset of the sun. Cheng Ling whispered, "Auntie, we can start now." Mu Sanyang was taken aback and said, "Shouldn't we wait until the second half of the night?" The latter half of the night is usually the most tiring time for the human body, and at this time, people's vigilance will also be lowered to the lowest level. It is reasonable to leave quietly, and the latter half of the night is the most suitable time. Cheng Ling's gaze turned slightly. In her field of vision, although the night was blurry, to some extent, the subtle sounds and shadows that the human body made as it walked could not escape her eyes and ears. So, in her eyes, the current refugee area is like an explosive barrel that indicates quietness, but is actually quietly grilled on the flames, with the possibility of exploding at any time. Cheng Ling whispered, "Auntie, did you see that those people are walking and hooking up frequently?" During the day, the Guo family encountered a wall at Cheng Ling's place, but this clearly did not dispel his desire to cause unrest. On the contrary, because news was leaked from Cheng Ling's place, it was likely to make him more impatient. Based on the current observed movements, Cheng Ling concluded, "Auntie, it's highly likely that by the second half of the night, they'll be rushing towards the city gate." Mu Sanyang understood and immediately said, "Okay, then we'll leave right away." What can't be left? At the beginning, I stayed in this place, on the one hand, because the noble people in the city would give congee. People who were hungry and scared wanted to have a rest, get some food, and live an extra day. On the other hand, I have also fantasized about settling down in the city. Just fantasizing about this thing, just think about it, how many can be realized? Cheng Danny's eyes were filled with tears as she gently said, we've only stopped for a few days, and then we'll have to leave again. Where are we going? I don't know. Cheng Danny wiped away her tears and took the initiative to pick up the heaviest burden. Actually, there aren't many things. The heaviest bundle contains their pottery jars and broken bowls, as well as a few bamboo tubes of water. These things are not worth money, but they are indispensable on the escape route. Cheng Ernie and Mu Sanyang each carried a bundle, while Cheng Ling was empty-handed. She just quietly clasped a Swiss military knife in her palm, and if someone with no eyes came to stop her on the way out, she didn't mind using weapons. Starting with Cheng Ling, the four of them silently walked out of the shack. The night provided them with the best cover, and the mother and daughter quickly penetrated the mountains and forests behind them from one side of the shack. At the moment of entering the mountain, Cheng Danny let out a heavy breath. Cheng Ernie whispered happily, great, no one is stopping us. Cheng Ling also breathed a light sigh of relief, but she did not feel that her previous vigilance was unnecessary. On the contrary, after entering the mountain, she became even more cautious. Cheng Ling Dao said, Auntie, wait for me here for a moment. After speaking, she came to the back of the big stone she had hidden before. Under the cover of a stone, she quickly took out a dark blue diagonal canvas bag from the space, and then placed objects such as binoculars, insect repellents, small composite crossbows, windproof matches, compasses, survival whistles, zip ties, and bright flashlights in the canvas bag. Of course, at the same time, Cheng Ling did not forget to take out a few compressed biscuits, tear off the packaging and put them in a fresh dot-keeping bag, and also put them in a canvas bag. After finishing all of this, she walked out from behind the stone and returned to Mu Sanyang and her two sisters. Mu Sanyang's eyes were sharp, and in the blurry night, she could see that she had an extra bag on her body. She was a bit surprised and said, Linga, is this the bag you said you picked up in the mountains before? Yes, the excuse Cheng Ling made before was waiting here for a response. Cheng Ling then hurriedly said, yes, Auntie, I'm afraid someone might see me wrong. I still hid this bag behind a stone earlier. Auntie, there are many strange things in the bag, and I've looked at them and they're all quite useful. As she spoke, she took out the bottle of insect repellent from her bag. The insect repellent is spray type. Cheng Ling presses the pump head and sprays it on Mu Sanyang and his two sisters' legs and feet, and also sprays it on himself. Cheng Danny took a step back in shock, while Cheng Ernie covered her mouth with her hand. Mu Sanyang cautiously said, Linga, what are you doing? Cheng Ling Dao said, Auntie, when you enter the mountain, the first important thing is to prevent mosquitoes. This thing can repel insects. After speaking, she took the insect repellent back into her canvas bag. There's no need to explain why this thing can repel insects, there's no need, and the timing is not right now. As he spoke, Cheng Ling took out the composite crossbow from the canvas bag again. This composite crossbow is foldable and lightweight, capable of filling 5 crossbows at once. When opened, the widest part is only 1 foot in size and can be used with one hand. Cheng Ling Bian held a crossbow machine in his left hand and casually bent a branch about 3 feet long in his right hand. She walked up the mountain, tapping lightly on both sides of the road with branches. The purpose of doing this is to scare the snake out of the grass. After the summer flood, the weather in Pingxian area is still hot, and the mountains are full of insects and snakes. Going up at night is actually a very dangerous thing. But Cheng Ling had already planned to cross this mountain tonight and head towards Wei County to the north. It's better to stay as far away as those refugees who will cause riots. Cheng Ling doesn't think they will succeed in charging the city. So, the best way to avoid the liquidation of officers and soldiers in Pingxian is to stay away quickly. So, the mother and daughter four touched the darkness and walked for an unknown amount of time, even under the sparse starlight in the sky. Finally, as if halfway up the mountain, Cheng Ling gasped for breath and couldn't resist suggesting, "Auntie, why don't we stop and light a torch before we leave?" As soon as I finished speaking, I suddenly felt the sky above suddenly brighten up. Cheng Ling exclaimed, turned around and suddenly realized that it was already dawn. Unexpectedly, the location of Pingxian County below was suddenly lit with countless torches at the same time. Under the reflection of the fire, the four of them stood on the mountain, towering and clearly visible from afar. The city gate over there opened wide, and countless officers and soldiers rushed out, fighting against the refugees crowded at the gate. Blood splattered everywhere, and screams echoed through the night sky. Although they were already very far away, at this moment, the four people standing on the mountain all felt as if the distant screams were just right in their ears. Cheng Danny bit her lips, and Cheng Ling couldn't help but tremble and say, "If we don't leave." Suddenly, a gust of strong wind came from the side, and Cheng Ling was instantly alert. With a lift of his left hand between his sides, a crossbow arrow shot like a shooting star chasing the moon, swiftly attacking the incoming black shadow. Cheng Danny! Ah! Screaming incessantly, the black figure was shot by an arrow in its neck and instantly fell backwards to the ground. Cheng Ling exclaimed in surprise, "It's a wolf." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Tai Chi Piles under Moonlight. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Tai Chi Piles under Moonlight. Wolves are basically not solitary. At this moment, Cheng Ling, who was standing in place with a crossbow, clearly saw nothing, but could clearly feel that in the mountains and forests ahead, there were countless hidden murders in the shadows. Cheng Ling dared not act recklessly, just raised the crossbow and made threatening movements. She knows that wolves are very intelligent animals. Since the wolf that launched the exploratory attack earlier died so easily, the pack following closely behind is likely to immediately hibernate. They are not going to give up their prey, but must be waiting in hibernation for the right moment. As long as Cheng Ling's side shows any relaxation, these countless fierce beasts in the darkness will surely pounce and mercilessly tear the mother and daughter into their stomachs. Cheng Ling lowered his voice and ordered, "Auntie, take your elder sister and second sister up the tree first." Mu Sanyang's hands trembled slightly. Before she was unconscious from this injury, she was originally the backbone of the family. On the way to escape, the three children listened to her no matter what they did. After waking up this time, Cheng Ling, who had always been somewhat silent, suddenly became extremely independent as if she had undergone a transformation. She shouldered the heavy burden of this family like a true man in times of crisis. Although she is the youngest, she is also a delicate woman. Mu Sanyang had the intention to persuade Cheng Ling not to show off her strength, but she also knew that her procrastination could potentially bring even greater trouble to Cheng Ling. Therefore, although her heart was full of twists and turns, Mu Sanyang ultimately didn't say a word of nonsense. She just grabbed the hands of Cheng Danny and Cheng Ling one by one, saying, "Danny Ernie, let's retreat." About 2 feet behind them on the left, there happened to be a big tree. Cheng Danny and Cheng Ling were both very obedient. The three of them carefully retreated, only a few steps away, but their hearts were trembling with fear. At the edge of the tree, Mu Sanyang pushed and Cheng Ling quickly climbed the tree. She hooked her legs onto a tree branch nearly 3 meters above the ground, hanging upside down to pull Cheng Danny. Cheng Danny was held by Cheng Ling with one hand, and with the help of Mu Sanyang behind her, she quickly climbed the tree. The sisters came to La Mu Sanyang again. Mu Zanyang was worried about Cheng Ling. At the moment when she just climbed the tree, she couldn't help looking back. At this moment, the branch that was hooked by Cheng Ling suddenly made a subtle click. Cheng Ling was startled and shouted, "Auntie." Mu Sanyang quickly hugged the trunk of the big tree with all her might. But Cheng Ling, who was listening to the commotion behind her, had already been affected and couldn't help but tilt her head slightly. In the night, a gust of wind suddenly rose. Ow! It's a pack of wolves, launching an attack at this moment. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! As several figures rushed towards him with a gust of blood, the crossbows and arrows in Cheng Ling's hand were also fired at almost the same moment. This is a modern composite crossbow that has the function of rapid firing. The arrow box of the composite crossbow can hold 5 crossbow arrows at once. Cheng Ling had previously fired 1, but now there are still 4 arrows left. She did not reserve any and released all 4 arrows in one go. Woo! The wolf's screams were accompanied by the thud of its body landing. Suddenly, 4 more wolf corpses appeared in front of Cheng Ling. This ferocity is enough to deter the footsteps of the wolves. Even the carnivorous beast couldn't help feeling scared at this moment. With the howling of the wolf, the other wolves rushed out of the grass. At this moment, the lower quarter moon, which had been obscured by clouds, slowly protruded half of its face. Moonlight poured down like frost and snow, illuminating the heavily shadowed mountains and forests. A pair of wolf eyes in the moonlight were like a dark green ghostly fire, shining on Cheng Ernie's back in the tree behind her, sweating profusely. However, she only gritted her teeth tightly, afraid that any further movement would harm Cheng Ling ahead. This is a silent confrontation. 5 wolf corpses are the most powerful deterrent, which makes the pack of wolves hesitant to launch attacks easily. Wolves, after all, are wolves. No matter how smart an animal is, it would not know that these 5 arrows are the limits of Cheng Ling. If she wants to shoot arrows again, she must refill the arrow box. And the confrontation with beasts is often just a time to fill the arrow box, perhaps to distinguish life and death. Cheng Ling then only maintained the posture of holding the crossbow machine, while her footsteps and standing posture changed slightly without any trace. The foundation of this body is not strong enough. After crossing over, although Cheng Ling made up for many shortcomings in strength due to his strong spirit and superb skills, he seemed to have extraordinary martial arts skills. But in reality, the strength she can unleash now is even less than 1/10 of her peak period. For example, now, in the confrontation with the wolves, what she first feels is not a lack of willpower, but a physical difficulty to sustain. Her stamina seems to be reaching its limit. Cheng Ling's method is to transform a regular standing posture into a standing post through subtle body movements and slight adjustments in posture. The practice of traditional Chinese martial arts emphasizes the external practice of muscles, bones, and skin, and the internal practice of breathing. Among them, the importance of practicing one breath internally even goes beyond practicing muscles, bones, and skin externally. Zhuanggong is a method of refining qi that is unified from the outside to the inside. Through exquisite standing posts, Cheng Ling can not only save energy, but also integrate his own strength from the outside into one. Cheng Ling then took a slow breath and imagined Tai Chi. She majored in Wing Chun Quan, but the pile technique that has been the foundation for her all along is Tai Chi Pile. The Tai Chi Pile combines strength and softness, with yin and yang working together, making it the authentic sect of the Xianmen sect. For modern martial artists, practicing has a more health-preserving effect, which can make their martial arts life more vigorous and long-lasting. Cheng Ling breathed with a soothing rhythm, which coincided with the softness of Tai Chi. However, the current state and atmosphere were actually extremely tense, and a crisis was imminent, which was another kind of hardness. When this softness and rigidity were unified, Cheng Ling's mood also reached a different sublimation in this strange crisis state. She was not in a hurry, but at this moment, the moonlight in the sky suddenly lit up slightly. To others, this degree of brightness may only be seen as a slight increase in the brightness of the moon, which is not unusual. But here at Cheng Ling, there was a clear feeling that there seemed to be a strange energy projected from the moonlight like flowing water. Vaguely, this energy flowed into her body through her breathing and pores. Is she absorbing the essence of moonlight? As soon as this thought came out, Cheng Ling suddenly felt blessed to his soul. She lifted the branch in her right hand, and at that moment, the Tai Chi sword's lifting posture was lifted from her hand. In the pack of wolves, the head wolf seemed uneasy and suddenly looked up slightly with a soft whistle. With a movement of Cheng Ling's wrist, the branch came out of his hand, and the newly acquired force flew along the branch at the same time. Under the moonlight, a stream of light cuts through the space, hiss. The withered branches are like the sharpest sword in the world, piercing through the throat of the wolf. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Magic Energy, New Usage of Golden Fingers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Magic Energy, New Usage of Golden Fingers. The head wolf fell to the ground and died. Under the moonlight, this mountain forest, including the night breeze between the mountains, seemed to experience a brief pause. Until a moment later, Cheng Ling picked up the crossbow again and made a move to shoot arrows. The other pack of wolves howled mournfully, wailing. Amidst the chaotic howling of wolves, a wolf finally turned around and fled. A wolf pack without a wolf head is like a scattered soldier without a general. They have no organization, no discipline, no morale, and even no direction. The remaining wolf pack followed closely and ran away, with such a fast speed that it managed to escape completely in just a moment. If it weren't for a few wolf corpses remaining on the ground, the recent wolf attack would have seemed as if it had never happened before. On the big tree in the rear, Cheng Ling climbed up the trunk and slid down the tree. Then she crossed her waist and smiled, Linga, ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Cheng Ling laughed so hard that she couldn't catch her breath. She smiled wide open, as if she had never laughed so happily in her life. I am really happy. After the extreme shock, there is extreme joy. Whoever can control such emotions is either a saint or a traitor. Anyway, it's not Cheng Ling. Following closely behind Cheng Ling, Cheng Danny wanted to reach out and cover her mouth, but Cheng Danny couldn't even close her own mouth. She reached out and didn't cover Cheng Ling, but instead covered her own mouth first. Woo woo! Cheng Danny cried with joy. Finally, Mu Sanyang's eyes lit up astonishingly. Her hands and feet were a bit soft, but she still walked up to Cheng Ling first and took her hand to examine her limbs. Linga, you're not injured, that's great. Cheng Ling's left hand was still holding the composite crossbow, and when Mu Sanyang held her hand to check, her limbs were slightly stiff. She replied, I'm fine, auntie. Mu Sanyang nodded, her eyes shining, and she stared straight at Cheng Ling, asking, Brother Ling, you just threw a branch and shot the wolf to death. What happened? Where did the power come from? This question is a bit interesting. Cheng Ling blinked her eyes, and the feeling of the moonlight entering her body was very mysterious. She actually wanted to know what was going on. Is it because of her pile skills, or is there something unusual in this world? Or, is it that she already has abnormalities? After all, the experience of traveling has already happened, and she even brought a small space with her. So, it doesn't seem strange to have any more uniqueness. But Mu Sanyang's question gave Cheng Ling some new ideas. She immediately inserted her hand into the shoulder bag on her side, took out 5 more crossbow arrows from the bag, and put them into the arrow box of the composite crossbow. Cheng Ling had a total of 30 crossbows and arrows like this. She took out 10 and put them in her shoulder bag, while the remaining 20 were still hidden in space. The mountain is dangerous, and although the wolf pack retreats, Cheng Ling still needs to keep the composite crossbow fully loaded at all times to ensure safety. After completing this task, she slightly adjusted her standing posture, bent her knees slightly, stepped on yin and yang with her feet, and divided her hands into Tai Chi. The composite crossbow was still tightly held by her left hand, and the Tai Chi stake was placed somewhat non-standard. But just as Cheng Ling used this non-standard Tai Chi stake to observe Tai Chi and once again explored the mysterious feeling of the past in his heart, the moonlight shone in the night sky, the strange energy that was invisible to the naked eye but could be clearly sensed by Cheng Ling herself once again flowed into her body like flowing water. From the skin, to the fascia, and then to the blood meridians. Cheng Ling's eyes seemed to also contain a faint light. She looked at Mu Sanyang and whispered, Auntie, when I was in danger just now, I suddenly had a strange feeling. It seemed that there was suddenly some mysterious power added to my body. Auntie, do you know what's going on? Choosing to reveal this to Mu Sanyang is actually Cheng Ling probing Mu Sanyang. In the days to come, she will exhibit more and more abnormalities, and there will always be many skills that the original Cheng Ling cannot possess. All of this must have a source and a name. Time travel cannot be said, and space cannot be said either. So how can we find other excuses? Cheng Ling decided to ask Mu Sanyang to help her find it. Sure enough, mothers naturally have a natural talent for finding reasons for their children. Mu Sanyang voluntarily said, "You practiced the booklet left by your grandfather and found qi, didn't you?" Qi, same qi. The two words have the same pronunciation, but there are slight differences in concept. Cheng Ling understood, and Mu Sanyang should have said qi instead of qi. She searched for memories, thinking about the foundation of the Cheng family and the origin of Mu Sanyang. The Cheng family, which is said to be an ordinary peasant family, is not entirely so. Because Cheng Ling's father, Cheng Ming, had studied and even passed the Tongxing exam. In Meihua village at that time, the Cheng family could also be said to be a family of farming and reading. If it weren't for the death of Cheng Ling's grandfather, the serious illness of his grandmother, and the fact that his father Cheng Ming was killed by bandits while he was out, the life of the Cheng family in the village would have been quite good. As for Mu Sanyang, she used to come from a decent family and was the youngest daughter of an old doctor in the town. Mu Sanyang followed her father from a young age and learned some basic medical skills. Later, the old doctor passed away, and Mu Sanyang was young and widowed. She utilized her medical skills, not only helping the women in the village with minor illnesses and pains, but sometimes also taking care of the delivery of the mother. With this skill, she raised 3 children and also established herself in Meihua village. As for the booklet left by Grandpa Mu, Cheng Ling has an impression. That should actually be a picture book of 5 animal plays, with the traditional Chinese medicine Qigong breathing method attached afterwards. The original master of this method, Cheng Ling Song, has practiced it loosely, which was supposed to strengthen the body, but in reality, he has never achieved any results. Now Mu Sanyang gathered Cheng Ling's changes on this, and Cheng Ling immediately said, "Auntie, is this qi?" She raised her hand and consciously wanted to mobilize the moonlight essence that had just entered her body. She wanted to see if she could release it. But as a result, well, after moving her palm, Cheng Ling felt a bit embarrassed and said, "Auntie, I can feel the presence of this qi, but it seems difficult to control it anymore." Previously, in a state of urgency, Cheng Ling threw out a branch while qi attached to it, which turned out to be abnormal. Cheng Ling done pondered. It seems that she must strengthen her exercise and strive to be able to control this energy freely as soon as possible. Otherwise, having such a force that cannot be applied would be a waste of time. Perhaps, she could also pick up the breathing technique left by Grandpa Mu and practice it well. However, Mu Sanyang was very pleased and said, "Linga, you can feel the existence of qi, which is already extremely great. You have talent like this. You need to practice well, this is the ability to settle down." Cheng Ling nodded solemnly. The two of them spoke without delay, and Cheng Ling said, "Auntie, let's pack up these wolf corpses." At the same time, she also greeted Cheng Danny and Cheng Ernie, while Cheng Ling walked towards the nearest wolf corpse. She wanted to pull out all the crossbows and arrows from the wolf corpse and recycle them. Due to fear of blood splashing out, Cheng Ling walked up to the back of the wolf corpse and pressed down on its neck with one hand. At this moment, a new twist emerged. Cheng Ling suddenly felt that the previously uncontrollable energy was suddenly moving again spontaneously. Qi, rushing towards the wolf corpse. Cheng Ling's heart skipped a beat and was about to instinctively retract her hand when she suddenly heard a ding sound as if money had fallen into a bag. What? End of this chapter. Chapter 10. I am a corpse touching expert. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. I am a corpse-touching expert. Cheng Ling's heart was beating wildly. She found that her small personal space also underwent new changes at this moment. Next to a small cubic space, a new small space slowly unfolded. The new small space is adjacent to the old space, both cubic in size, but with clear barriers on both sides. The old space was filled with all the supplies from the hiking backpack that Cheng Ling carried before crossing, but the new space was empty except for a small handful of copper coins that suddenly fell into the new space. The key point is, how did this small handful of copper coins come about? At this moment, a familiar female voice sounded in Cheng Ling's ear at the same time. The backpack binding and picking function allows you to collect wolf corpses and obtain the Great Qi Tongbao, as well as 23 copper coins. Cheng Ling, I couldn't hold back a moment of excitement, and my back bristled with sweat. Why is this female voice familiar? Because this is clearly the voice that Cheng Ling had before her time traveling. Here we have to mention some of the things she was doing before her time traveling. Apart from carrying a backpack while hiking, Cheng Ling just finished dubbing for a Chinese-style mobile game before the hike. Then during her travels, sometimes she would take out her phone and run around the game as a test. So, Cheng Ling now began to associate. Am I gaining some abilities in this game while traveling? This is wonderful, but as the saying goes, time travel has happened, so what else is impossible? Now is not the time to delve deeper into the origins of these abilities. What Cheng Ling is more concerned about is, besides the small space around me and the ability to pick up backpacks, do I have any other abilities? Excited, Cheng Ling quickly explored for a while, and in Mu Sanyang's eyes, it was. Cheng Ling actually touched the wolf corpse and started to daydream. Brother Ling. Mu Sanyang called out with some concern. Cheng Ling regained her senses and, after just investigating, she found that she should not have any other gaming abilities at the moment except for her personal space and backpack pickup. There is no such thing as carrying a game system with her. She just called out for a while, cough. There was no system responding to her. Of course, backpack picking is already very magical. Without a system, Cheng Ling is even happier. She has been practicing martial arts since childhood. To be honest, she probably can't adapt to the existence of a portable system. If there really was a game system appearing, Cheng Ling thought for a moment, perhaps even she herself would find it difficult to predict what her reaction would be. Cheng Ling responded to Mu Sanyang by saying, "Auntie, I'm fine." As she spoke, she pressed down on the wolf's neck again, only to hear a hiss. This time, she skillfully pulled out the crossbow arrow. The wolf's blood splattered a little, and Cheng Ling smoothly avoided it. Then, he placed the bloody crossbow and arrow in the nearby grass to wipe it off. She followed suit and walked past 5 wolf corpses, retrieving all 5 crossbows and arrows. During this process, she also attempted to pick up and collect other wolf corpses, and then confirmed one more point. The prerequisite for picking up and collecting was that her body must contain moonlight energy. Or rather, she must have qi in her body. Without qi, picking and collecting cannot be activated. This is more like an energy exchange, while Cheng Ling understands it more as a special ability. It's much easier to understand that no matter what kind of game or not, picking and collecting is simply her own special ability. Cheng Danny and Cheng Ernie followed closely behind Cheng Ling. Cheng Danny took out a rusty kitchen knife from her tattered bundle and tried to skin the wolf corpse. During the process, Cheng Ernie kept swallowing saliva and saying, "There's a lot of meat. Big sister, Linga, and auntie, we can finally open up and eat meat, right?" In front of her, these wolf corpses fell into her eyes, and where was the ferocious and bloody body of a wild beast? This is clearly a pile of oily and fragrant meat. Cheng Ling stood next to the body of the head wolf, changing his stance and standing on the Tai Chi stake for a short while. The ray of moonlight energy she had previously absorbed only supported her to touch a wolf corpse, and it had already been exhausted. Now if she wants to try to pick up and collect the body of the wolf, she must absorb energy again. After taking dozens of breaths, Cheng Ling placed his hand on the body of the wolf. The familiar female voice rang out again. You have collected the body of the head wolf, obtained the great Chi Tong Bao, 51 copper coins, obtained a completed wolf skin, and obtained 10 pounds of wolf meat. The energy faded away, and Cheng Ling looked at the newly added things in the picking space, feeling excited and novel. But at the same time, she also felt that her hands and feet seemed to be slightly soft, and a wave of mental exhaustion surged in. The ability to pick up and collect is mainly consumed by Qi, but it seems that it is not just Qi. Interesting, this is really fascinating. Cheng Ling was not afraid, but she did not recklessly continue to try to collect the wolf corpses in the middle. She only pulled out the crossbows and arrows from them, but did not collect them. Or rather, she had attempted to collect before, but due to a lack of Qi, she was unable to collect successfully. Theoretically, if he continues to absorb the Moonlight essence, Cheng Ling should be able to collect it again. The process spirit abandoned this approach. She just stood beside the body of the wolf and continued to absorb the essence of Moonlight while the Moonlight was still there. Cheng Ling thought. I should gather these energies and try to control them more deeply, rather than just using them to touch the corpse. This is not easy, and the most essential aspect of the process is the spirit of study. She's not in a hurry either. Practicing martial arts is a painstaking process. How can a person who can grow up and practice the 3 nines in winter and the 3 volts in summer be impatient? On the other side, Cheng Danny and Cheng Ernie peeled the wolf's skin, while Mu Sanyang began to pick up the wolf's meat. After standing at the stake for about 15 minutes, Cheng Ling felt a slight increase in her meridians and the energy in her body seemed to be difficult to sustain, so she gave up on continuing to stand. She came to Mu Sanyang and her 2 sisters and crouched down, saying, Auntie, leave this to me. You can take the 2 sisters to make some straw baskets so that we can pack meat. He said, let's not stay in this place for too long. Although the wolf pack was scattered by her, this place carries a strong aura of evil energy, but in the mountains and forests, this aura cannot deter the surrounding beasts for too long. Cheng Ling is afraid that the bloody smell of wolf skinning here will attract other big things, and she cannot guarantee that she will be invincible in the mountains and forests. Fortunately, the newly added energy in her body gave her some confidence. Cheng Ling moved her hands and feet and found that although she couldn't control the qi in her body at present, with this qi, her spirit seemed to be stronger and her limbs were noticeably more powerful than before. Mu Sanyang said, "Ni, go and weave a straw basket. Linga, I'll tidy up the wolf's skin while you pick the meat." End of this chapter.